This event, hang on. This event is brought to you by Age Friendly Edmonton and is an initiative of the Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council, supported by the City of Edmonton. Age Friendly Edmonton is part of a global movement to build age-friendly cities and communities, and is a city that recognizes the diverse populations and needs of seniors and actively supports their inclusion, engagement, and well-being. Now we want to honor those who came before us. We respectfully acknowledge that the Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council is in Treaty 6 and on the traditional lands of the Cree, Blackfoot, Iroquois, Dene, Nakudasot, Métis, and Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe nations. We acknowledge and respect the past, present, and future generations of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who continue to strengthen Edmonton and Canada. Now for just a few housekeeping items before we get started with our panel discussion. If you have comments or questions as they come to mind, feel free to type them into the chat. We will do our very best to answer them at the end of the panel discussion as time allows. Please also keep muted during the panel discussion. As this discussion is being recorded, you can view this later on our Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council YouTube channel. I'll ask Krista to put the link in the chat for you and others to view at a later time. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dorothy Lowry. Dorothy is the co-chair of our Ageism Hub, with Age Friendly Edmonton, and is our moderator today. Dorothy has been a volunteer with Age Friendly Edmonton for the past 3 years and brings passion to her work, leading and supporting initiatives to enhance the lives of older adults in Edmonton. So Dorothy, take it away.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I'd like to welcome our panelists. So we have Sonia Henning, who's a career and transition coach with Toombs Inc. We have Roxanne Davis, who's a lawyer and partner with Carbert Waite. And we have Stacy Danley, who's a senior partner with Alpine. So we are very pleased to welcome all of our panelists today. So in terms of setting the stage for a discussion today, the last Stats Canada inquiry into how many seniors were working in 2015 actually found that 1 in 5 seniors or people over the age of 65 were still working either part-time or even full-time in the workforce. And compared to 2 decades ago, that's a huge increase in the number of seniors that are working. So in our discussion today, we're going to focus on some questions that are intended to help our audience out in terms of both applying for a job or even for volunteer work. Because sometimes even when you are looking at a volunteer position, you may be asked to provide a resume, you may have to go through an interview. And so we're going to cover questions surrounding that hopefully will help you out. So I'm going to start today with a question for Sonia. And that wonderful thing that we all have, I'm sure, during our lifetime, revised and revised many times, the resume. So Sonia, could you please share with us some ways to age-proof your resume?
Hi, Dorothy. Thank you very much, and thank you for attending. Yeah, the resume is that one document we all dread to create, rewrite, and rewrite. And so from an age-proving perspective, so I will talk first about the formatting and then about some of the content. In regards to the format, keep it simple and clean. Don't go fancy. There are a lot of templates out there. Avoid anything that has a tables, blocks in there, because you will most likely encounter problems when you submit the resume, so the application tracking systems. that they will read any blocks or tables as a spam, and will end up in spam, in the spam folder. In regards to the length of the resume, keep it, from a like I would say keep it at 2 pages. I wouldn't necessarily dread that it goes 3 pages, because when I look at long-term careers, it's more of the relevance of the information and the experience you put in the content. So start with your career history, keep it relevant from an employer perspective, from a recruiter perspective. The most interesting information is the last 10 years, because it's the relevant information. Choose in your profile statement, that's the top part of the resume, where you position yourself as the professional. If your career has spanned over 30 years, say something to the effect of 15 plus years or 20 plus years. Don't write 30 or 35 years of experience in XYZ. Focus on achievements, accomplishments that showcase your skills that are relevant and current to what you're applying for. What else? Lose graduation dates. Not relevant unless it's something that you did, if you did an MBA, or if you have a more recent certificate in the last couple of years. That can be showcased in your resume, but otherwise not important. Professional development. Add professional development courses in your resume, again relevant to what you're applying to, and it's current. There are lots of options out there from a learning perspective through LinkedIn courses or Coursera courses that are free that you can take, like micro learning opportunities, but again relevant to the current market. Community engagement and interest, that section at the very end, you can use that to highlight what your engagement is. It could be a volunteer position. It could be an interest that's maybe related to an industry that you are applying to. Those, again, keep it relevant to the application. I think that's a highlight of lots of things.
Yeah, it's a complicated area, but thank you, Sonia, for those highlights and great ideas. So next we're going to move to Roxanne, and Roxanne, a sort of a bigger, I guess, concern. If you feel you've been discriminated against for a job or position in the past, be it work or even volunteer, how could you proactively approach a new opportunity to avoid having that experience more than once?
Well, that's going to depend on how it is that you feel like you've been discriminated against. If it's a matter of you've submitted all sorts of resumes and just never had a callback, then maybe it's a matter of making changes to the resume, like Sonia just described, to age-proof the resume so it's more likely to get you an interview. If you've had interviews in the past, then but have just never been selected for a job, then maybe it's related to how you're answering questions or how you're presenting yourself in the interview that you would want to adjust and update. If it's related to more specific questions, you've been told that there are concerns about whether you have the capability to do the job. That can be more complicated and difficult to navigate, and it very much depends on the circumstances and what the examples are that have been given. Sometimes it might be a concern that you might not be in it for the long term and they're looking to recruit somebody who would be part of their succession plan over many years in a role, in which case you would want to be strategic in how you're answering questions about what you're commitment is to how much more time that you might see yourself having in the workforce generally, or in committing to the organization that you're interviewing with. We can't hear you, Dorothy.
There you go. Thanks, Roxanne. Some good points and things to think about. So really to, as you're going through the process of applying for a job or volunteer work, to pay attention to what's happened in your past experiences and use them sort of as your best practices to either avoid or build on as you go forward. Okay, Stacy, a question for you. What are some of the common biases relating to age, and how could you combat them if you actually make your way through to that interview process?
Sure. Thanks, Dorothy. So as a recruiter who works with many different kinds of organizations, there's really kind of 6 common biases that we tend to see. So I'm just going to go through all 6 quickly and give a high-level overview of some ways that you may be able to combat those in an interview process. So number 1 would be that older adults have lower productivity and motivation. But we all know that that could apply to anyone, that productivity is not synonymous with aging. So to demonstrate your ability to be productive, highlight your measurable achievements. How has your knowledge increased over time? What skills have you recently learned? So talk about your motivation to find meaningful work, and indicate that now is a time that you really want to focus on your career. The second one that we hear a lot is that older adults are maybe less adaptable to change. But again, adaptability really varies from person to person. So try to think of an example of, a new system that you may have implemented, or a process that you made more efficient, or an innovative project that you've been a part of. Talk about people that you may have mentored. So showing a willingness to adapt to change, I think is really important. Number 3 would be that older adults are less likely to learn new skills as quickly as others. So again, any examples that you can provide in an interview to show that you are a continual learner and that you've continued to learn throughout your career, I think is really, really important. Places like LinkedIn offer so many free courses, and so take advantage of that and highlight that in an interview. Another bias is that adults older adults are close to retirement. So again, to echo previous comments, be transparent about your plans and weave your 5 or 10-year plan into the conversation, so that there aren't assumptions made about how close you are to retirement. Number 5 would be that older adults can have health problems that may affect their work. So again, highlight things that you like to do in your spare time, like hiking or traveling, or, things that indicate that you are an active individual and you're just as capable as any other potential applicant. And lastly, there is sometimes a bias that older adults are more costly to employ because you may be expecting a higher salary. So again, be open with the interviewer. Talk about your salary expectations and the pay range that you are open to accepting. If an interviewer thinks that you may be, overqualified, explain why you are interested in a role like this with less demanding duties. Perhaps you're looking for more work-life balance. But at the end of the day, if you approach the interview with some good examples up your sleeve, I think you can combat some of these assumptions.
Great. Thank you, Stacy, and thanks for running through those 6 biases and with suggestions for us. So I'm going to move back to Sonia again, and a question that I know when you're younger is always important, but you're often asked for even as a more mature candidate is references, and any suggestions there in selecting your references, Sonia?
Yes, vet your references. So it doesn't matter what age you what age you are at, make sure that you know what your references are saying about you and have these conversations and prepare them for that call that potentially can come. So there's actually no difference or no big difference between an early career job seeker versus a mid or a latter one. The most important piece is make sure that you have selected a reference, that's a person that gives you a reference and can speak to your skills, to your experience, and not just to your technical skills, also to your transferable skills in relation to the position that you are applying for. And you know, if it's a volunteer position, it might be a character reference. So that speaks more to you as a person, as an interpersonal, from an interpersonal skills level to communication skills. The most important piece is contact your references and talk to them and know what they're saying. And so that is my takeaway. What often happens, actually, what I've seen in the last year is that a lot of companies are not providing references. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest challenges employees have to leave as they leave their current employer or are looking for other opportunities. And I think I know that there's a risk management aspect to that, and you know, I can't speak to that, but they give confirmation of employment, but not necessarily speak to the details of your work, and it has nothing to do with your performance. It's just from a risk management perspective. So vet your references, and pick ones that can speak to the abilities that you will bring to the next role that you're applying to.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Sonia. And moving to Roxanne again. Roxanne, what strategies can you take or do in a preventative standpoint to limit your exposure to negative stereotyping and discrimination?
Something that I often recommend to my clients who are in the process of perhaps accepted a severance package recently and are looking for a new opportunity is that they be really strategic in their information gathering and about the organizations that they are applying with. Speak to people in your network who might know about other people who work at that organization. Have they made a habit in the past of laying off everybody over 50 and always hiring only very young candidates right out of school, things like that. Search your network on LinkedIn or other organizations and find some contacts who already work in the organization and take them out for coffee and ask them for information about what their own experience is like, whether the organization has a lot of older adults in the leadership team or in other parts of the organization, and whether they've been supportive of keeping those individuals employed as they approach typical retirement age and beyond. If you gather that information and use it in making your decisions about where you're applying, you're less likely to come across these types of discriminatory behaviors.
Dorothy, you're muted.
I'm sorry, my mute didn't want to unmute. I'm back. Thanks, Roxanne, and you know, some good points to think of. So regardless of your age, do your research. So Stacy, to you next. How would you answer or prepare for questions that may intentionally or otherwise by their nature reduce your ability to be considered for a position based on your age or your life status? So for example, if you've been out of the workforce for a few years and you're now trying to come back in.
That's a great question, and there's a few different approaches that you can use. As I mentioned before, you can try to weave it into the conversation, about your intentions, whether that be to work for the next 5 or 10 years. And sadly, it's not uncommon for mature job seekers to be asked these kinds of inappropriate questions, such as, how long do you plan to work? So you could also try redirecting the conversation rather than giving a specific timeline, saying something like, I think this position is a great match for my skills and experience, and it would allow me to, continue to grow professionally. And I hope to be here for as long as I can contribute. So that's an okay answer too. You don't have to commit to a 5-year plan. Again, it's really what your comfort level is. They are not supposed to ask those questions, but it still happens. And I think by redirecting it to focus on all of the positives that you bring to the position, that's really the best way that you can prepare for those types of questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stacey. And Sonia, back to you in terms of, and this is a big question around social media and how important social media is today within the job search, and what types of social media you should be on or you shouldn't be on. Sonia.
Yeah, that is a big, that is also a big question. So I'll try to summarize it. So I will never tell any of my clients you have to be on social media in order to find the next role. Never will I say that, because there are some situations I have come across over the length of my career that people are intentionally not on social media because they don't want to be found. So I mean, that is a consideration. Facebook, not important in the job search. It's just lose that. And this has nothing to do with age. Like I have young job seekers, and I have mid-career job seekers, and I have end of career job seekers, returning to work job seekers. None of them will I ever recommend that they have Facebook or use Facebook from a job search perspective. Now let's go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a professional networking tool. It creates a visibility of your career history, and you can use it in job search and also to do research. So that's how I position LinkedIn. Again, I will never tell my clients you have to have a LinkedIn profile. I will talk about what the benefit is of it in regards to that search, that you can look at companies, you can look at openings at companies, you can connect to people at companies, and that for me is the greatest value of LinkedIn, that you create a visibility, and you will not. Well, there's a function that says open to work. And I will leave this up to the recruiter to maybe talk about if that ever comes up. But open to work is that a search parameter on a recruiter's list. Recruiters or companies will look for people with certain skill sets and accomplishments. The LinkedIn profile also will not be a duplicate of your resume, but it is a really great tool to reach out to people and to create that visibility, that people know that you are in the market with a certain skill set, right? So that's what I see as LinkedIn being a very valuable tool. What I also recommend to clients is do a deep dive on your social, on your digital footprint, because your employer will search for it, right? So go and Google yourself, and there are other ways of doing that. See what comes up about you, and just from a LinkedIn perspective, just quickly, there are functions in there that you can you can manage the privacy of your LinkedIn profile, but with in mind anything that's on the net, there's very little privacy from that perspective. So did I answer everything? Was that the question?
I think you did. Thank you very much. So So thanks for those guidelines. And I'm going to actually move to Stacy next. Stacy, in terms of capitalizing on your current network when looking for a new opportunity, any suggestions there?
Absolutely. So, experienced hires tend to know a lot of people. So don't be afraid to put the word out there. You never know, who you are going to talk to that could lead you to your next job. So your friends, your family, previous coworkers, send them a note and let them know that you are on the job market, because, that is still how a lot of hiring happens, right or wrong. It's who you know, and it's that referral network. So don't be afraid to reach out and mention them. If you know someone who works at a company and they have a job opening, ask them about it. Ask if they can take your resume to HR for you. Often companies have employee referral programs. So don't be afraid to do that. Further to Sonia's comments, LinkedIn is absolutely the preferred digital platform for looking for a position. And so, absolutely, I would recommend that someone have a LinkedIn profile, and certainly set that to say open to work. Because as a recruiter, we filter LinkedIn profiles based on that setting. And so if we have an urgent need, we are going to look at profiles that say open to work sooner than any other profile. So I think that that's really, really important, and a way to be visible in the market.
Okay. And then one other final question for you, Stacy. What strategies could you use to bring forward positive aspects of being an older applicant?
It's really important to put yourself in the interviewer's shoes, especially if the interviewer is younger than you. The last thing that they want to hear maybe is, that you might be able to do the job better than they can. And you may not intend to come off that way. But I think it's really important to make sure that you are not being intimidating in that sense, and, use your maturity to ask good questions and really listen to what the needs of the job and the department are. So when you really understand what it is that the interviewer is looking for, then you can choose specific examples to highlight your experience and why you are a good fit for that position. And again, even if the question about your age doesn't come up, it doesn't hurt to weave it into the conversation, and you can address it head on and say, you may have some questions for me, being a mature candidate, but my years of experience allow me to be quick on my feet and handle all kinds of different situations, and really highlight all of the advantages that your experience brings, and really show that they're assets.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Stacy. And Roxanne, final questions for you around those illegal questions. So do you have some examples of illegal and inappropriate questions, and how could you handle them effectively?
Sure. So the typical illegal questions are, how old are you? When did you graduate? Do you have any disabilities? Those types of issues, those are going to be outside of human rights legislation in every case. There are more creative ways that people have of asking those questions that aren't offside. Instead of asking how old you are, they will probably ask how many years of experience you have. And this goes into the comments made about age proofing your resume. You don't have to give an exact number. You don't have to say, I have 30 years of experience. You can say, I have more than 20 years of experience. And so there's a strategic way of answering those questions that are trying to get around being overtly illegal. Questions about whether you have any disabilities, they'll probably go about that by saying, here are the requirements of the job, the number of hours in a day, the frequency of allowable breaks, that type of thing, and then ask you whether you have any circumstances that would prevent you from being able to do the job. And then you would just respond to say that unless there is a reason why you wouldn't be able to do the job, and in which case you have to be open and honest about that, then you would just respond to say that, no, there are no restrictions on my ability to meet those requirements. It's very important that when you are answering strategically that you don't lie. That can be a concern down the road if there's something even that you've misrepresented in terms of your experience or your ability to do the job, and you're ultimately hired, and then after you start the job, it becomes clear that there has been a misrepresentation or an outright lie, that can be grounds for terminating your employment. So you have to be very careful in making sure you're reframing the information and not giving inaccurate information.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Roxanne. Okay, so we've covered sort of the interview process, or the applying for a position or volunteer position, the tactical and the strategic aspects. So our last question, and I'm going to ask this question of all our panelists. So Sonia, I'll start with you. Is just a general question about how you're seeing ageism presented in the workforce today, and challenges that you're seeing, that we may have not already covered, that older workers are experiencing, and from your experience working with them, any best practices that you can bring forward that maybe we haven't already touched on. Anya?
The first thing that comes to mind is really that ageism is an opportunity to have biases against a job seeker. Is often presented when one only has the opportunity or only pursues online applications. So you are represented by a piece of paper, and even if you are writing that resume in a way that you don't have it doesn't stare the recruiter or the hiring manager. The years are not representing like 30 years of experience, where that unconscious bias can lead to.
Oh, did we lose Sonia?
To discrimination of one. And, I'm a huge fan and a huge supporter of networking, having conversations with people, finding opportunities to tell people who you are, what you are, because that's not a possibility that a piece of paper can often shine through. So, start, and again, when I use that word networking, probably most of the population will cringe and say, oh God, I'm not a marketer, I'm not a networker. And just to take that edge off, I mean, networking is nothing else than having a conversation with the next people that it can start with your neighbor, it can start with a friend, start with one. You don't have to network with 100 people. Start with, the people that you are familiar with, that that you're comfortable with, but know what you're looking for. Be aware of, be intentional about communicating what your skill set is, and don't underestimate the importance of your transferable skills. It's not just your technical abilities, right? So I think that for me, that's a big one. Start with that. Even when you are submitting an online application, look at who potentially works in that organization that you could have had a conversation with prior or after or during that process to find out more. And so that person could become an advocate, or there is an employee referral program existing. I mean, there's lots of large companies here in the Edmonton area. I'm not so familiar with Calgary or Manitoba, but they are there, right? So don't be afraid to create your visibility and make yourself known as available rather than unemployed. It's a big shift in your in your view, how you look at yourself. You're somebody who has something to offer. I'm available. These are the things I have available. I can do. I'm available to provide, and that will be a value to your organization or to this particular job or volunteer work, right?
Okay, great. Thank you, Sonia. And Stacy, from your standpoint, examples how you're seeing ageism presented today, and any best practices you'd like to share.
Certainly. Well, as most people know, we are in a talent short market. There's a shortage of qualified workers. And so mature candidates need to use that to their advantage and make sure that they are getting in front of hiring managers and recruiters whenever they can. Following Sonia's advice of keeping your resume simple, making sure that it gets uploaded properly into, an ATS or an applicant tracking system, really showcasing the last 10 years of experience. It's not necessary to go so far back, leveraging your network. As a recruiter, we also do a lot of work with companies who have temporary and contract needs. And so I would encourage all candidates to not be afraid of taking a term or a temporary position. Some people think that makes might make your resume look jumpy, but to me, again, that shows that you're adaptable, that you can jump into an organization and fill a temporary need. And I cannot tell you how many times over the years we have placed an individual on a temporary basis, and our client has been so impressed with them that they've created a permanent job for them. So I would really encourage you to do that. Reach out to a local recruiter, ask if they have any advice or know of any clients that are hiring. We always joke that looking for a job is a full-time job. So if it seems tiring or if it seems daunting, you're not alone in that. Anyone who is looking for a job feels that way. It is a big project, but if you can plug away on it a little bit every day, it's just, there is a little bit of luck and timing involved in that too.
Thank you, Stacy. Some great suggestions. And Roxanne, over to you. So how you're seeing ageism presented in the workforce today, and some best practices you would suggest.
Sure, I agree with everything that Stacy and Sonia have said so far. Let me perhaps answer from the perspective of how I've seen it manifest with in the employment context, not in the job search context. So once you have the job, or and how you're experiencing it in that context, it can come up in a lot of different ways. It can come up in terms of managers trying to micromanage or performance manage if they are seeing drops in productivity as people age. It can manifest in a lack of willingness to accommodate any requests for changes in the terms of employment. Sometimes people want to gradually wind down into retirement and not make an abrupt change. And there can often be an unwillingness to reduce hours in a day or days of work in a week. It's good to be open about what you're looking for in terms of those possibilities. Be creative. You don't have to just accept whatever the employer is proposing. If you've got ideas of ways you can change terms of employment, make your business case, present how it can be a win-win. And if ultimately it comes down to an issue of the employer you're with fundamentally not having any interest in you continuing with the organization, then don't be afraid to look for an organization that will be more open to the experience that you have to offer.
Okay, great. Thank you to all of our panelists today. I think we've had a great well, really a workshop today with some ideas that people hopefully can follow up on. And Caroline, so just are there any, we have a few minutes left, so are there any questions that we can maybe cover in our remaining time?
I know there were a few questions in the chat, but I think that those questions were handled nicely by Sonia. So are there some other questions that we have for our panelists? Okay, I see one hand up. I'm going to ask Paula to unmute herself and go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, I've got a quick question regarding reference letters. Years ago, they were used quite frequently. How about in today's world? Because I think one of you was mentioning that a lot of companies don't like to give references. So during a job interview, can I bring in a couple? Because I'm a corporate trainer. I've been teaching for years. Can I bring in a letter of reference from one of my previous employers? Is that valid at all?
Sonia, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Hi, Paula.
Hi.
I think reference letters, they were, as long as they're current,
Yeah.
right? They add value, but typically an employer wants to speak to somebody. You know, it's a written reference, so they wanna go into more specific questions with that person. Now, if that person is not willing to or that's a policy, a company policy that they are not providing any further detail, then you just have to tell the employer that you've been given that reference letter.
Yeah.
The policy is no further details will be shared from a confidentiality perspective, or whatever the reason is that they have the policy in place. But in that case, yeah. But again, it's the relevance. Like if the reference letter was from 1998 and it's now 2023, you know, you as an employee have had a lengthy career in between. So employers are looking for the most recent references, and typically they're looking for somebody that can speak to. But in that case, that an organization is not providing or not willing to provide a reference, absolutely bring it.
Okay.
Bring the most recent one.
So I have one more question. Perhaps I've missed it. Just to summarize, on a resume, you're not recommending putting dates for university graduation, because I graduated in 1987. So you're not recommending putting that down. I have a business degree, so I don't put that down anymore. Is that what you're suggesting on a resume? Yeah.
So put your degree on the resume, the degree and the university where you graduated from. So let me put a little caveat on this. I wish job search would be as black and white as we all, you know, if we do A, we go to B, we go to C. So if you are applying it for in an academic institution, post-secondary, they will ask for every year, every single detail. So, but if you go into private sector, like let's say you apply for in a big utility company, they don't care that you have graduated in 1987 anymore. They just want to know that you have if that's a requirement, right? So be cautious about or be aware of that, right? So post-secondaries will require every single detail of your career history if you're applying in academia. The other one is, I believe, actually the government as well. They ask for very specific details, but you will find on their sites as you submit your application, they have guidelines on what they're looking for in regards to their requirements for job application. So just follow them, right? So, but in general, no.
Okay.
Great. Thanks very much, Sonia. And thank you, Paula, for your questions. I do have a question in the chat, and one of our three panelists, whoever would like to answer this, please go ahead. So I'll read the question. Following a long-term employment with a single employer, how do you recommend selecting employment references? So who would like to answer that question?
Stacy?
Sure. So again, there's no black and white answer to this. You know, in a perfect world, as a recruiter, we would speak to 2 previous supervisors. That would always be our first choice. You know, a reference letter, maybe if it's a situation where they're not allowed to give a reference, or, you know, we're no longer able to reach the person. It's always tricky when someone has worked for the same company for a length of time. And you know, that should be an asset, but it actually makes references harder sometimes. So in that situation, I would recommend that you reach out to a colleague. Doesn't have to be a manager, just someone who can speak to the work that you did at that organization. Perhaps it was a client, perhaps it was someone who reported to you, but just anyone else at that organization that could provide a little bit of background to your time there, I think would be relevant.
Thank you.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for that, Stacy. Actually, I have a question. Well, maybe I'll see is there anybody else that has their hand up at the moment? No, I can't see anything at the moment, but I do have a question. How, as an older worker, handle the generation gap at work? Like you've to workers of all ages, and you're you consider yourself an older worker. What are some tips that you can employ to handle that generation gap? So any ideas? Any of our panelists want to take that one on?
I love that question because I mean, you know, most so I'll just comment on some of that stuff. Most of the organizations out there have 5 generations, potentially 5 different generations in the workplace, right? And so the challenges are, if they are challenges, I think actually when we start again reframing and look at what are the opportunities here that we have all those different generations. And the fundamental piece here is, for me, from my perspective, from what I have seen in organizations, working with organizations and employees, is the communication piece, right? And that's the big failure we see in any type of relationship. It doesn't matter actually if it's a younger worker, a mid-career, an older worker. You know, it's how does one position themselves as an employee with their skills and their knowledge to learn from each generation. Like a recent university graduate has potentially ideas that are very valuable, and they have great ideas and innovation, and rather than just shutting it down, listening and communicating about that. And so that's at every level, you know, and so that distinction that we have, older workers and younger workers in the workforce, that sets us up for failure, as we are just looking at that. We are people with skill sets, and how do we complement each other, and how do we approach each other in a communication style that is inclusive? So that's just my observation.
Thank you, Sonia. That's excellent. Great. Anybody else have anything to say, Stacy or Roxanne? Oh, okay. I think Paula has her hand up again.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Just one last question. So your recommendation, just overall, to be able to get past sort of the algorithms online when you're applying, is to stay or make it look like you don't have more than 20 years experience. Is that right? You don't want to be screened out. Am I correct with that?
Stacy, could you maybe take that one?
Again, there's no right or wrong to this. I always say that it's the last 10 years of your career that is probably the most important. Now, if you've worked for 30 years at the same company, that's okay to say that. But if you have worked, you know, at ABC company for the last 10 years and then had other roles previous to that, probably not as relevant anymore to include positions from a long, long time ago. But it depends what you're applying for. If you're applying for a job that, you know, would utilize those skills from 20 or 30 years ago, then, you know, maybe you do want to include that. You know, it's really, there is no right and wrong, further to Sonia's. I just think you generally don't need to go back too far in time, and you really just want to showcase your most relevant experience. Sometimes I'll see resumes where candidates do, you know, a nice summary and some nice bullet points under their most recent positions, and then you just quickly list your last, you know, the positions before that, but you don't spend as much time. You would never include, you know, 10 bullet points behind a job that you had in the 90s if, you know, we're just going back too far, and it's going to make your resume too long.
Well, here's my question. Sorry, Stacey, because I understand what you're saying, but I find it a tad confusing. So what if I worked, I'll be honest with you, I worked for a post-secondary institution for 22 years successfully.
Okay.
So do I include that in my profile on LinkedIn, or do I just include the last 10 years? So that's why I find it confusing.
If it's the same employer for those last 22 years, you would probably include that.
The entire 22 years.
I would say so. I don't know. What do you think, Sonia?
Yeah, and again, to the point, you know, I wish it would be as black and white as we like to go through life, but it isn't. So, but to Stacey's point, just for clarification, Paula, the last 22 years you worked for post-secondary. Okay, yes. Obviously, so you put, you know, XYZ university or college, the years, your position, and you put some highlights of accomplishment and achievements that you're proud of. And think about, you know, what is the next role that you're targeting? Is it a leadership role? Is it a more grassroots role? Is it a less responsibility type of role? So, I mean, be intentional about what you put in on your LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn profile really is different than your resume. Your resume should not be on LinkedIn. It's not, LinkedIn is not a copy of your resume. This is a teaser, like, for lack of a better word. It gives highlights. So put the 22 years on there, put the different positions on there. On the resume, same thing, but prior to the 22 years, let's say if you have worked at XYZ high school for 5 years, I wouldn't go, as to Stacey's point, go into details. You might just want to say this was the school or another college with this position, and even leave the years out, and don't have to say anything else. So it just shows a longevity of career, right? But and on LinkedIn you can do the same.
Yeah, but they actually, just so you're aware, on LinkedIn for education, you don't have to put the dates down.
No,
but you do have, they do require the dates for your jobs, though. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but you don't have to put the months down. So leave the month out, right? Just put the years on. So is there no I can't recall right now. I have to be in front of the screen. So that you cannot just put a company and then a job without a year. That doesn't.
No. In fact, it won't even accept your profile. It actually says that it's missing the year. So even if I wanted to exclude the year, they won't let you. You have to fill it in.
I mean, that's a good guideline actually then, right? So just go 22 years, take your last employer and then leave that.
Yeah, but what if you get, see, here's a concern. I have to share this because I have a lot of female friends, highly skilled, really intelligent, 25, 28 years experience. And they keep saying to me, Paula, I can't seem to get an interview. And these are skilled. These are very, very bright, intelligent women. They've been working for years, and there's a bias. Their resume it's almost like it's bypassed. So that's why I'm asking this question. I have to share this with them as well. So you're suggesting leave the 22 years. And I'm saying, I don't want to do that anymore. It makes me sad to say that. I have a lot of experience. But you know what?
Paula, sorry for interrupting, but let's assume, right, your career started at that post-secondary in your 20s. And 22 years later, so you're now in your late 40s, early 50s. I'm just working with a client who has exactly that. He's in his mid 50s. He doesn't want to retire. He's not ready to retire. He's not he wants to be still participating in. That's still extremely reasonable. I mean, there is no reason why that individual should not. So from saying they are skilled, they're intelligent, and here's another bias, and I will, or a misinformation out there. You can be the most qualified candidate with the skills and the experience that employer is looking for, and you will never get an interview. And it has nothing to do with age, or it could be something internal. They have selected another candidate. There was already somebody coming in through the site, or all of a sudden somebody brings somebody forward and say, oh, we're bypassing different steps in the recruitment. That's not black and white. And that's why it is so critical to network, to create these conversations. Don't just wait until there's a position out there. Be intentional, target your market. What are the organizations that you're interested in? Who are the people who work in these organizations? Are there some that you know, and start having conversations around that. And don't ask for a job. Like, don't say, I'm looking for a job. Tell them that you are in the market, you are exploring your next opportunities, and know what that kind of looks like. Know your value.
It's a great discussion. Thank you very much, Sonia. I noticed Stacy had her hand up, and I think Stacy wanted to say a couple of things. So we will finish up with Stacy's comments, and then we'll wind things up. I think our time is almost up. So go ahead, Stacy.
I was just going to say, if you're looking for a workaround, with LinkedIn, I don't think you have to start at the beginning of your tenure with that company necessarily. Like, using myself as an example, I've been with Applin for 15 years. I wouldn't have to say junior recruiter, 2007. I could just start, you can choose where you want your LinkedIn profile to start. There is nothing to say that you have to go back to the beginning. So, right. Like I hope the other panelists would agree with that. But, if you just wanted to focus on what your job titles were over the last 10 years, I think that's just fine. You don't have to go back to the beginning. You held that position for that length of time. But there's nothing to say that my LinkedIn profile couldn't start 10 years ago as a senior consultant. Just because I worked there for 15 years doesn't mean, you have to list that whole thing. So that was just a thought.
Okay. Yeah. I just don't want to come across as being dishonest. I'll be honest. I've been successfully teaching for 28 years. And I don't tell people that now, because I'm a little paranoid, because I don't want people thinking, and I want to work another 10 years. I like to work till I'm like 75, 78. And I'm thinking, I don't know. I can't tell people how long I've been in the workplace, because it concerns me a little.
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's about reframing the conversation and just trying to focus on the most, the most relevant part. And, certainly always being honest in an interview, but choosing what you want to highlight is up to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're almost at 1 o'clock, and I'd like to thank our panelists, Stacy, Roxanne, and Sonia, and our moderator, Dorothy, for a very lively discussion. I think we could probably go on and on about this topic, and it's a topic of interest to Age Friendly Edmonton, and we hope to explore this even more, because I think that that ageism is prevalent in the workforce, and there are older adults wanting to get back into the workforce or volunteer and still continue to be useful. I think we all have something to give, so hopefully you found our presentations and our panelists engaging today. If you have any questions that come up later, please feel free to email us at agefriendly@seniorscouncil.net. And if I can't answer that question, I will direct it to one of our panelists. I'll also send out a short survey about this event, and we hope that you will take the time to complete it, just to help us out as we plan more Lunch and Learns. Our next Lunch and Learn is on Wednesday, May the 17th, also at noon, and on a little bit lighter topic of music therapy. So I hope you can join us for this particular session. And if you want to find out more about what is happening in the senior sector, we have a link letter. If you go to our ESCC Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council website, We have a wealth of information on our Lunch and Learns and all of the different initiatives around Age Friendly Edmonton. So thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.